So Brianna and I did this presentation on our academic argument paper and made a presentation on the blog we created for the project. So while creating my academic argument paper on writing and critical inquiry, I really learned a lot, and I know it's all one point, but that's because it's all under one really big point that I couldn't stress enough, and that's why I bolded it and underlined it, because taking your time actually saves you time. In past grades, when we've been doing research papers in 9th and 10th grade, I've always just kind of zoomed through the annotated bibliography or highlighting the sources, which in fact, I actually never learned or knew about highlighting sources until Ms. Neatfeld taught us about it, but that actually turned out to help a bunch. But I would always just rush right through the outline, rush right through the bibliography, and just kind of get it done so I could get the participation points and move on and write my rough and final draft later off the top of my head. But for this academic argument paper, that just really didn't work. I didn't use an outline and wrote my rough draft, and it turned out actually really bad. And it just wasted so much time because I had to totally redo my final draft. And if I didn't do what Ms. Neatfeld taught us with highlighting the sources and all, which I've never done before, I would have wasted even more time like I have in past years with research papers, going back through the source, scrolling, trying to find it, trying to find what I cited, and then trying to figure out the page number later. Just all this huge mess that I could have saved so much time if I actually just took my time in the beginning steps. It was just really crazy how much time taking your time in the beginning saves, while I thought it was just the opposite this whole time.
During this English class, I learned that an annotated bibliography was important for finding good articles, and I learned how to make a better one this year. I didn't think making an outline was important, but because normally I can't write by a list, I just write what I'm thinking of at that time. Instead, I did the outline first this year, and it made everything easier, and I didn't take as long with my overall project. Before I took this class, I never really thought about beauty at all. It wasn't something I really cared about. But now I notice beauty around me more, and I think about how beauty is more on the inside than on the outside. Because everyone knows this, deep down everyone does know that beauty is more on the outside, but I think that we don't grasp it all the time, because I can go around and think that, oh, that person is ugly, but now I'm more conscious of when I think that, and now I notice that there is beauty in everything and everyone. I learned that you should learn the backstories of painting or some sort of creation someone made, because you can see more or less beauty in it. Because I learned that from the article we talked about with the girl who impregnated herself and then did abortions just to get the blood to paint with. That was totally wrong in my opinion, and she never should have done that, because she's killing innocent babies. And so that really helped me learn more about how there's beauty in everything and to notice it.
So for my academic argument, I was researching American culture and what it has to say on beauty standards. That's why I have what I googled, basically ideal beauty body, and that's the photo that came up. They didn't really have any for men, unfortunately. I wish they did, but I was able to find that one. Basically, when Miss Neatfeld said beauty at the beginning of the class, the first thing that came to my head, and probably all of our heads, was a person, the outward appearance. Like Brianna said, even though we really should be looking on the inside, what we do as a culture and as people is we take people on the outside. Renee was reflecting how she judges people in Walmart, and we really all do the same. None of us are innocent or not guilty of doing that. So that's the path I took of people. So it's I realized there's so much on what the ideal feminine body looks like. I wonder what the ideal masculine body looks like. So I went into that and started discovering the differences between what the ideal masculine feminine body were. But when I was researching this, I actually came to my true academic argument question, and that was, do we control what we see as attractive, or does culture? Because as I was researching these things, I noticed how literally everything was the same thing, same body shape, same level of fitness. Magazines, advertisements, social media, whatever my sources said, lab studies, everything I looked at had the exact same type of person. So that became my academic argument question. Do we control what we see as attractive, or does culture? And the side that I took on this argument was that culture controls this. There really is a large consensus on beauty. One of my sources, it was a study, and they took a survey, and 70% of women, when presented with the question, if I were thinner, I think more men would notice me, chose 5 on a scale from 1 to 5. That means the people that still agreed and picked 4 and 3 weren't included. 70% of women agreed that. And I think it's hard to deny that if 70% of women think the extreme on the same thing, it's hard to deny that culture definitely isn't pushing for people to be thinner. It's also not just pushing for women to be thinner, it's pushing for men to be thinner and all that. It's pushing for that ideal body shape. But also while researching my academic argument and proving my point and what I thought, I did notice something really, really interesting. The ideal masculine body is more fit and, the cut abdominals and the filled muscular top. And there's, at the same time, while there's this push for thinness in culture, there's been this push lately to be healthy and hit the gym and get muscular. And while this goes well with the male ideal body, it really clashes with the feminine ideal body. And I found that really, really interesting, how culture is almost a hypocrite of its own self in that sense. I found this really, really interesting competition while researching. It's a female bodybuilding competition. And what's really ironic about it is that a lady goes up and gets a 10 from one judge and 1 from the other. The one that gave her a 10 says, wow, you're really muscular. That's what bodybuilding looks like. You're the most muscular up there. And the one that gave her 1 says, she's not feminine enough, not pretty enough. It's just kind of crazy how there's all this hypocrisy that people don't even know what to make of themselves. The judges don't know what to make what's in front of them, and that's their job. So how do we expect the lady up there or young girls in our culture to know what to make of themselves? I read the rule book too, and the rule book itself couldn't even decide how to judge the female bodybuilding contestants. Basically just said give your best guess and combine the ideal feminine body with how much muscle they have. And that's a tough job to do. But of course, to every argument there's always a counter argument, and the counter argument to this would be that culture doesn't really have a grasp on what we see as beautiful in others. I have my type, he has his type. I see blonde hair pretty, he sees brown hair pretty. And though maybe while there's truth to that, there really is this basis that because of culture, almost everyone agrees on to an extent of what is beautiful. And I just find it hard to argue that other way, but it is possible to argue that way. And because I had to think about both sides, that really led to a lot of critical inquiry. What do I see as beautiful? What does culture see as beautiful? How much do these things match up? And the more and more I researched, the more and more I wrote, the more and more I argued, I figured out just how shockingly everything I think and others think, I discussed with my parents and teachers and people, how much everyone thinks matches up with what culture wants us to think. One other thing I realized while researching in this hypocrisy thing is that it almost seems like it's a mistake. Why would culture say they want us to be thin but also muscular at the same time? But it's not a mistake. It's the people that are making the advertisements in the magazines trying to be as, basically genius as possible so they can make the most benefit. Because 1 minute you're too thin, now you need to buy a gym membership. Now you need to spend money and give them money. But now you've gotten too fit, you've gotten too fat, now you're fat, now you've got to buy a diet. Culture, I discovered, though it seems really trendy and cool when you're listening and obeying to culture, it's really just harmful. It makes you spend more money. It's really this cruel, mean cycle that I didn't really realize I was there until I more critically inquired about my topic that I discovered.
While making my research paper, I learned that there was a number of arguments on how to determine if an object had beauty or not, and that it said that beauty, when discussed in schools, it helps them engage more in their visual world. Beauty, when discussed in a group or class setting, can be said that based on all the people having the same look on it, that it's beautiful, or you can say it's based on opinion. Beauty is based on opinion. There are people who will disagree and say that if a group has the same opinion that the painting is beautiful, then that means everyone has the same beauty standard and beauty is all the same. But no, beauty isn't. A lot of people have their own opinions and most people don't agree all the same object is beautiful. A study was taken on 51 kids in 2 English primary schools. They were asked to take photographs on something they thought was beautiful and share it in several group interviews. The interviews showed how diverse the kids' views were on beauty, and it showed how their experiences with beauty can be relevant and meaningful in their lives. They liked art because they were able to express themselves through it. The article that I got this information on, A Place for Beauty in Art Education by Robert Watts, says that children's responses to beauty are not merely passive, but often expressive, and that some of their responses to beauty illustrate art educators' principles of participation individually and self-expression. It argues that art educators should reappraise the value of beauty in art education and reflect on its potential for raising children's levels of engagement with the visual world.
So here's our sources, of course, but that was our presentation, but there's also, of course, the blog we created that we would like to show you. Pull that up. I accidentally closed it, my fault. Basically, our blog is called beautyintheworld.edublogs.org, and what we wrote in our presentation we just expanded on further in our blogs, and you could go there and see a lot more on it. So here's it is, and so here's Brianna's post. Do you have anything you want to say on that at all? No? It's not working. Technology. So here's hers. This is my post. I put this photo here. This is the how cruel culture is towards what we see as beautiful in each other. That was really my main argument. And I thought this was really thought-provoking. When I saw this, I was researching it, and I thought it was a perfect photo for this blog. Here's this woman judging her. I know the whole male-dominated culture thing, but here's her judging her because she thinks she's not dressed right, she's not according to culture, she's not beautiful, and her way is better, while she's thinking the same thing about her. And that was kind of what I discovered about how culture makes us judge others and say, wow, that's not according to culture, but at the same time, you just see others and say, wow, I'm not according to culture, I need to be more like them. And you get in this cycle of spinning, of judging others, yet wanting to be them, so you swap, and then you want to swap back. And it's just kind of crazy that I didn't even realize this at all at first. Then here's Brianna's. She put the banana duct tape there about what she learned about writing critical inquiry. Anything else from that? And then here's a little bit more about what I learned about writing critical inquiry. In here, I put a photo of how to write an outline because I thought that was really important because I didn't write one, and I realized just how much I needed to learn how to write one. So if anyone would really care to, you can always visit our blog and see how to write an outline, but also not just see that, but also just be informed on what we wrote. If you're interested in what we were talking about, there's more there. So that's it for our presentation, but feel free to visit our blog, and thanks for listening. Any questions?
I'm going to start you off with the question I've had for everyone. Can both of you guys refresh us on what your academic argument was? So remember, that's not the research question, which I definitely heard your research question. Can you guys both remind me of where you were researching and then what the statement was that you particularly were arguing?
I was arguing that beauty is based on opinion and not everyone has the same opinion on what object is.
Okay, so that beauty is subjective, then, that each person's definition of beauty is a different definition? All right, and did you have an easy time researching for that, Brie?
Yeah, I found several articles that said beauty is based on opinion and not.
Yeah. Where were you finding your articles? Did you use a particular, we talked about using our school databases, we were using Google Scholar, we were using regular Google, but we were judging the credibility of websites. What did you find, where was the spot that you found most research?
I just looked everything up on Google. I looked up questions and then looked for the articles that were best for answering my question.
Okay, and do you know, was you were processing whether or not it was a credible research source for this, What were some things that you were looking for?
Not a lot of ads, and if it was by more of a art standpoint than just regular objects.
Okay.
Art.
Okay. From you guys in this room, can you guys add to that too? What have you guys taken? How, if you're using Google as a, because we don't have a lot of access to databases at Loudonville, and that's going to be one of the biggest pros of going into college is you're going to have a much bigger, like we have EBSCO, but that's really our one place that we have. We don't have that full wealth of databases. How do you guys judge the credibility of a website? Yeah, jump in.
A lot of my websites, like it would say at the top, like these are like researchers and like this is their study. So
Okay.
if it's like a study on something, like then it would show that it's reliable.
Okay.
There's a lot of stuff.
So if it's a study, if it's giving you the names of all the
Yeah.
researchers, yep, that's a good point. What other things might you guys look for?
I look for like if it's visually appealing or not, and if it has any typos. Like if it has typos, I don't really think it's credible. Like,
Okay,
I
so
don't really
definitely
feel-
avoiding anything that has typos on it. That I would agree, 100%. That's going to tell you they did not put their time into polishing this and editing it.
I'd look into like the author's background because like if you're on like a math paper and the author has like they only went to college for like English or something, then it's probably not credible because they're not
Totally.
really educated.
Totally. So looking at that author, you want to add to that, Matt?
I was just gonna say that, like she was saying, I always want to make sure the author's identified, but also the credibility of the source. I often don't like to use .coms unless it's a really trusted like news source, like New York Times, or
Yeah.
maybe Psychology Today, depending on who wrote it. But usually I try to veer away from .com because anyone can make a .com. That's why Wikipedia is .com.
Yeah.
So,
You also want to avoid blogs.
yeah.
Blogs are not going to be a spot, but hang on. You might find, I know. Now, blogs for you guys, this is a great way for us to teach. But remember, somebody else could find your blog and then try to cite this.
I mean,
And if
there's
they
a .org.
did, yeah, I mean, you want to look, you want to see, you want to know who Matthew Myrie is, so that you know whether or not you can pay attention to this. This would probably not be something that you'd want your students to cite necessarily. Now, the interesting part is, you guys through this process, you have really good research, and it's actually been peer reviewed by each other, and on top of it, it's also been teacher reviewed. So they actually probably would be pretty safe doing this, but do you notice that this could be a 9th grader that made this? You need some information. You need to know who that person is that's speaking to you about the subject. Now, if it's a blog coming specifically from a professor for a state university, then that might be a blog that you can pay attention to if it's a school university coming from a professor and it's on the topic. But you want to know a lot more information about where your research came from, and that's one of our big emphases through this project.
I think our blog definitely would like inspire ideas more than it would be able to cite them, but this would definitely be a place you could like get an idea for a paper for sure.
Nice. And that's also true of the process of starting research. You don't necessarily need to be in the most credible source just to start your questioning. You need to get to those credible sources for the final bringing together of your evidence. Because this is just the brainstorming part that we're talking about. Yep.
I guess
Any
I
other
never answered
questions?
your question.
Okay, go ahead.
So my academic argument, I know I made the research question pretty clear. My academic argument was that basically culture controls American culture controls what we see as beautiful in each other. Any other questions at all? Alright, I think that's it.
All right, let's give them a round of applause.